I think because I came from a charity based in our local community, but that was, a good size, 70 members of staff, 70 volunteers. But when we went into the pandemic, we, didn't have what we needed to be able to deliver services from home. There was like that 70 members of staff, but probably only, I think it was 4 of us had smartphones that were work phones. And maybe 10 people had laptops. So we were just hugely ill-equipped for working from home and continuing to deliver services. And it wasn't because we hadn't seen that it was something that we needed. It was more just a case of we prioritised money.
The funding elsewhere.
Yeah, you felt like that was a luxury, and we felt like, oh no, we actually, if it's £1,000 for a laptop, actually that could run a group for 10 weeks for young people. So we were like, oh no, we better just run the group and share a laptop between 20 of us. So I think that it just never felt like something that we could do. Whereas when we went into the pandemic, digital went from being like a luxury to a complete essential. The members of the community that we worked with were so vulnerable, probably, up there with the most vulnerable, and we couldn't just suddenly stop engaging with them because there was a pandemic. They didn't have the support network from anybody else. We had to be present. But that organisation was able to tap into its reserves and pay for the devices, which at that point were absolutely extortionate. We did recoup that funding because there was funds that became available from the government, Martin Lewis Fund, and there was brilliant initiatives came out, but a lot of that, we didn't get that funding a lot of the time for 3 or 4 months into the pandemic.
Yeah, a lot of charities that we spoke to with this, it was giving them quotes, but it came a lot later, so it wasn't as just a quick turnaround for some of them.
So we kind of went from none of our digital services in the start of 2020 were we would send a text to really only the young people that we work with to say, remember your appointment, or remember you've got court, or remember I'm picking you up, or whatever it was. Whereas we then were delivering on Teams and having meetings. I remember, I've told this story before, but I remember the first time we did Teams in the senior management meeting, one of the managers was sitting squint on the screen. And then my daughter appeared because we were like, we'll seize the opportunity since we're at home, because we thought we'll just be at home for 3 weeks. We'll do potty training. So first ever Teams call that I did, Annie appeared butt naked in the back of the video.
With the potty probably.
No, just absolutely delighted with herself. And so then the rest of my team got to meet Annie in that way. But I think that is the reality of working from home, and I think that'll have been a lot of the reality for loads of our charities.
Absolutely. I mean, we went from only ever doing introduction calls just when we first met them by just a phone call, but then as soon as pandemic came in, it was all over Teams that we did, and it opened up the relationship so much better in a way that I think, just because you can see one-on-one, people were having much more open conversation about what their charity was all about, what were their aims, what are they trying to achieve, but also helped us understand a lot more. So then it was just that flow of a conversation where we can, they want mobile phones, but what are the mobile phones for? What are they trying to achieve? And a lot of the other organisations out there, they won't take that into consideration, whereas we want to make sure that we look after that area so then they can deliver their services really well. And that was a huge part, as well as doing our own team. We were doing our own team meetings on Teams, and like that, one of the time my youngest Daniel came in and kept banging his head off the table as he was hiding under, and I was trying to kick him out. And I had the rest of the team, and thankfully they were laughing at it, but that was the reality I think everybody was thrown into.
I think as well though, as much as we've come a long way, I think there are still so many organisations that, because they're so tiny and they're doing amazing things, but they still don't have much funding at all. Like, there was one charity who, it was one woman. You remember her? And she phoned and was like, I need to be able to separate. I need boundaries between what I'm doing with the charity and in my own life. And and that was why she needed a work phone. But remember, she was like, I literally cannot afford
the mobile phone.
And so, we looked at what could we do with her, how could we make it more affordable for that organisation. So as much as digital has come like a huge distance in the last 3 years, I'm pretty sure it was the first 3 months of the pandemic, the digital growth was what they'd expected in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy, the change. But there are still, especially in the third sector, there's still a huge amount of organisations that are left behind. And I think that that's what we are trying to do, is think about, how can we make digital more affordable so that the tiny organisations, the huge organisations are all equal, and that nobody is sort of, we know I'm too small, I can't afford it. Because actually, how do we engage with the most vulnerable if we don't have the devices to do it? And I think as well, a lot of our services have gone. So there was one organisation who said, we've gone entirely online. We do very little face to face. But some of the data and the devices that came out at the start of the pandemic, that's ending. So we're 2 years on. Now what do we do? And so
we've been helping like with MiFi devices, or giving them unlimited data lines, but looking at those costs to try and still make it as most affordable, because like you say, those funds are a way to stop. And then it's like, well, how do they still then reach, or how do the projects that they're doing, how do those people, the vulnerable, still engage in those projects? So it is about looking at other ways that they can support and be able to afford it.
And I think that if we look at it's all very well saying, here's this funding for 2 years, and don't get me wrong, we all grabbed it with 2 hands, the funding that was there, but that funding is never going to continue. So what we have to do is help the organisations find a way to make digital sustainable.
Yeah, because we tend to find a lot of the charities that, the organisations that we do speak to, they get funding, but they might only get it for a year or 2 years. So you can't then, that's where we have to be very careful by giving them a year's contract or a 2-year contract. It's not something that's 3 or 5 years, because it just doesn't suit somebody that doesn't know if they're going to get more funding for that purpose. So it's just making sure we look after them in that way.